He didn't say a word, just placed a signed divorce file on the marble table while the wedding flowers were still fresh in the vase. The sound of my heartbeat was louder than the silence that followed. 2 weeks? That's all it took. 14 days from I do to I'm done. I remember the scent of champagne still lingering in the air, the echoes of congratulations still playing in my head and his eyes, calm, unreadable, almost distant. Brad didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just looked at me, as if he had already rehearsed this moment 100 times, and I just stood there in disbelief, my hands still trembling from the morning coffee we'd shared together. How do you even react when someone walks away from something that hasn't even had time to begin? How do you lose something that was never given the chance to grow? For the world, it was Brad Pitt, another Hollywood heartbreak. For me, it was the quiet collapse of a dream I thought would last forever. The cameras would soon swarm outside. Headlines would scream 90 million divorce shock. But behind those flashing lights and headlines, there was a truth no one saw. A truth that began long before the wedding and ended long before the papers were signed. Sometimes love doesn't end in shouting. Sometimes it ends in silence. A silence so deep, it echoes louder than any fight ever could. That night, I stared at the empty bed, the faint crease where he used to sleep. There were still flowers from the wedding, still gifts unopened, still a note on the dresser that said, "You make me feel home." I kept reading that line over and over and until the words stopped making sense. Because if I made him feel home, why did he leave? Maybe this wasn't about love failing. Maybe it was about two souls carrying too much history, too much pain and not enough time. All I knew was that the man the world adored, the one whose smile could light up red carpets and break box offices, had just walked away from me. Not with anger, but with exhaustion. And that silence, that single moment, would haunt me for the rest of my life. Before the silence, before the heartbreak and the headlines, there was something simple, something that almost felt ordinary. It began on a warm evening in Los Angeles. The city lights glowed like melted gold, and the air was thick with laughter and stories. I remember walking into that charity event wearing a pale silver dress, the kind that caught light with every move. I wasn't expecting to meet anyone that night, least of all him. Brad wasn't surrounded by cameras or crowds. He was standing quietly by the back garden fountain, holding a glass of sparkling water, looking lost in thought. There was something about the stillness in him, something heavy, yet kind. When our eyes met, it wasn't a cinematic moment. It was quiet, human. He smiled, not the rehearsed Hollywood kind, but a small, real one like a secret only we shared. "You don't seem like you want to be here either," he said. Glancing at the crowd of bright smiles and louder conversations, I laughed softly. "I guess I prefer real moments over red carpets." He nodded, eyes glinting under the soft lights. "So do I." And that was it. The first thread that began to weave something beautiful and fragile. We spent hours talking that night, away from the noise, about books, travel, the ache of fame, and the hunger for peace. There was no flirtation, no pretense, just two people who felt seen for the first time in a long while. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet connection grew into something deeper. He'd call me after long filming days, sometimes just to hear someone speak softly, without judgment or expectation. There was a loneliness in him, not the kind that fame fills, but the kind that follows you even in a room full of people. He once told me, "Sometimes success feels like a room that's always full, but you're always alone." I understood that loneliness. I'd lived it in my own way. Maybe that's why we fit. Two quiet souls, craving peace in a world that never stopped watching. Our relationship stayed private. We weren't trying to hide. We were trying to protect it. We'd cook at home, watch old black and white movies, and laugh over burnt pancakes. Those were the nights when everything felt real, when it wasn't Brad Pitt, the movie star, and me, the mystery woman. It was just two people who found comfort in each other's silence. The proposal wasn't grand. No paparazzi, no spotlight. Just us, barefoot in the garden, under fairy lights he'd hung himself. He held my hands and said, "I don't need forever figured out. I just need you." I said yes, not because of the name or the fame, but because for the first time, I believed that love could be quiet and still be enough. The wedding happened 2 months later, small, elegant, intimate. The vows were simple, whispered between trembling smiles. He promised to protect my heart. I promised to never let the world come between us. For those first few days, everything felt weightless. He'd make coffee in the morning, humming softly while reading scripts. I'd sit by the window sketching, feeling safe. We didn't need much, just each other. Or at least, that's what I thought. But behind that peace, there were small cracks I ignored. Phone calls he took in another room, long silences that lasted a bit too long, and a certain sadness in his eyes whenever he thought I wasn't looking. He was there, but not completely. Present, but somehow far away. At night, he'd wake up suddenly, breathing heavy, as if haunted by something unseen. When I'd ask, he'd simply smile and say, "Just dreams. Go back to sleep." But his eyes told a different story, one I wasn't ready to read. The morning before everything changed, he kissed my forehead and said, "Don't ever think I didn't love you." It sounded like an ending disguised as affection, but I brushed it off. I didn't know those would be the last words he'd say to me as my husband. Sometimes love doesn't fall apart with chaos. It unravels in whispers. And ours had just begun to come undone. It started with quiet changes, the kind that don't make a sound when they happen, but you feel them anyway. He began staying out late, claiming meetings or reshoots. The first few times I believed him. I even packed him dinner once thinking it might help him rest. But the dinners came back untouched, and his messages grew shorter. "Busy day? Don't wait up. Running late again? We'll talk tomorrow." Tomorrow never came. I told myself it was just stress, the pressure of projects, the weight of the spotlight. But the truth was harder. It wasn't work keeping him away. It was something else, something that lived in the space between us. Nights became longer. The laughter that once filled our home turned into silence. He'd walk past me in the morning, polite but distant, like two strangers sharing a kitchen. I'd catch his reflection in the mirror, the same man, but not the same warmth. One evening, as I set 2 plates on the dining table, he came in, removed his watch, and said softly, "Don't wait for me tonight. I've got a late dinner with some producers." I smiled, but it felt rehearsed. "Sure, don't forget to eat." He nodded, kissed my forehead, the same gentle gesture, but this time it felt hollow. After he left, I sat in the quiet and watched the clock tick. The dinner grew cold, untouched. Around midnight, I saw it, the first sign, a photo on social media taken by someone at a private dinner. He was there, the same suit, the same glass of wine in hand, sitting beside a woman I didn't know. She wasn't touching him, but her eyes were. I stared at that image for a long time, trying to breathe, trying to believe there was an explanation. Maybe it was business. Maybe it was coincidence. But deep down, my heart already knew. Something had shifted. When he returned that night, I didn't ask. I just watched him take off his jacket, pour himself a drink, and sit on the couch in silence. "Long night?" I whispered. He looked up, surprised, as if he hadn't expected me to still be awake. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Just work stuff." But his eyes, they avoided mine. The next morning, I found his phone buzzing on the kitchen counter. A text from an unknown number flashed briefly before the screen went dark. I didn't want to look. I've never been that kind of person, but something in me broke. My hand moved before my conscience could stop it. "I can't stop thinking about you." Last night felt unreal. The words hit harder than I expected. I stood there, heart pounding, phone shaking in my hand. The sound of running water in the shower told me he was still inside, unaware that the truth had just shattered everything. I didn't confront him right away. Not because I was weak, but because I needed to understand why. Days passed. His distance grew colder, his touches fewer. Sometimes he'd reach for my hand but pull away before our fingers met. Other times he'd look at me with guilt, heavy, unspoken guilt that said more than any confession ever could. The house felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories of what love used to sound like. One afternoon I tried to talk to him. Really talk. "Brad," I said softly, "are we okay?" He froze. The way he did when he didn't want to lie. but didn't know how to tell the truth either. "We're fine," he replied too quickly. "Just tired. Just life." But fine doesn't sleep on the edge of the bed. Fine doesn't leave at dawn and return past midnight. Fine doesn't forget to say "I love you" for weeks. He wasn't fine. We weren't fine. There were moments when I'd watch him from across the room, trying to memorize the way he looked, the slope of his shoulders, the tiredness in his eyes, the way he ran his hands through his hair when he was lost in thought, because a part of me knew I was losing him. Not to someone else, but to something deeper. Regret, maybe, or fear. Then came the argument, the only one we truly had. He'd just come home late again. I was waiting by the window, heart racing between hope and anger. "Brad," I said, voice trembling, "is there something you need to tell me?" He sighed, rubbed his temples, and muttered, "Not tonight, please. I'm exhausted." "I've been waiting for you for hours," I whispered. "You don't even look at me anymore." He turned, eyes sharp for the first time. "What do you want me to say? That I'm trying and it's not enough? That I don't even know what I feel anymore?" The silence after that was heavier than the words. Tears filled my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "Then say that. Don't keep pretending." He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. He just stood there staring at me, as though he wanted to fix it, but didn't know how. And then, in that broken moment, he said the words that would replay in my mind for months. "Maybe love isn't always supposed to last. Maybe we just borrowed a moment that wasn't ours to keep." He left that night, and when I woke up the next morning, his wedding ring was on the table, next to a folded note. It only said 2 words, "I'm sorry." The morning after he left felt unreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's life. The sunlight poured through the curtains, soft and cruel, touching everything he'd left behind. His shoes were still by the door. His cologne still lingered on the pillow. His favorite mug, half full of coffee from the night before, sat untouched on the counter. It's strange how ordinary things become unbearable after love leaves. Every corner of the house whispered his absence. Every breath I took reminded me that I was still here, and he wasn't. I didn't cry at first. I just sat in silence staring at that folded note. 2 words. "I'm sorry." No explanations. No reasons. No closure. Just a sentence that felt both too much and not enough. Hours passed. I remember walking through the living room, touching the places he used to sit, the books he'd marked, the jacket he'd forgotten on the couch. I couldn't bring myself to move anything. It felt like if I did, he'd disappear completely. By evening, the phone began to ring. Friends, reporters, rumors. Someone had leaked it. The 90 million divorce. The news spread faster than the truth ever could. Headlines twisted the story before I could even breathe. "Brad Pitt calls it quits after 2 weeks." Inside the 90-meter heartbreak. She never saw it coming. They were right about that last part. I didn't. I remember sitting in front of the television, numb, watching strangers dissect my life, our life, like a script they could rewrite. They didn't see the nights we laughed until sunrise. They didn't see the quiet dinners, the whispered confessions, the shared dreams. They only saw the end. When the doorbell rang that night, I thought for a moment it was him. I rushed to the door, heart trembling, only to find a delivery man holding a box. "From Mr. Pitt," he said softly. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a small wooden box. No jewelry, no letter. Just a key and a folded photograph of us laughing on the beach. On the back of the photo, he had written, "You'll always have the part of me the world never saw." That was when I broke. Not because he left, but because that note told me he loved me, just not enough to stay. The nights that followed were heavy. I'd wake up reaching for him, only to touch cold sheets. I stopped answering calls. The tabloids turned the story into spectacle. Debates, gossip, speculation. But no one asked how it felt. They didn't know about the silence that followed me everywhere. The way my chest tightened whenever I smelled his cologne. The way I'd see his face in crowds, only to realize it was just memory playing tricks on me. I tried to hate him. I wanted to. But how do you hate someone who never shouted, never cursed, never blamed, just walked away quietly because something in them was already broken? I began to realize that the pain wasn't just from losing him. It was from realizing that love, even the most beautiful kind, can exist only in moments, and some moments aren't meant to last forever. Weeks turned into months. Lawyers called. Papers were signed. I stared at the ink where his signature sat beside mine, a name that once meant safety now sealing our separation. When the settlement reached the news, $90 million divorce finalized, the world gasped again. But no one talked about what it really cost. Not the money, the memories, the quiet grief of losing someone who was still alive, just unreachable. I kept the wooden box. I kept the photograph. I kept the key, though I never learned what it opened. Maybe it wasn't meant to open anything. Maybe it was just symbolic, the last door between us, one that would stay locked forever. One night, unable to sleep, I drove through the city. The same streets we once walked hand in hand now felt foreign. I ended up by the ocean, the same place that photo was taken. The wind was cold, the waves restless. I stood there for a long time, clutching that key, whispering into the wind. Why did you leave without letting me understand? The waves didn't answer. They never do. I dropped the key into the sea that night. It disappeared beneath the tide. Like him, like us. That's when it hit me the deepest wound wasn't that he left. It was that he never told me why. Because sometimes what breaks us most isn't what people do. It's the silence they leave behind. For weeks, I tried to rebuild myself from the silence he left behind. The papers were signed, the headlines faded, and the world moved on. But I didn't. Everywhere I went, his name followed. Every interview, every article, every accidental song that reminded me of him. It all pulled me back into that unfinished story. Then one morning, out of nowhere, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. Meet me at the old garden. No cameras. No questions, please. My heart froze. It was him. I sat there for a few seconds, unable to breathe. That same garden, the one where he'd proposed under fairy lights, barefoot and smiling, the one that once felt like the safest place in the world. Part of me wanted to ignore it. But another part, the one still searching for closure, couldn't resist. When I arrived, the sun was setting. The air was warm, quiet, too quiet. He was standing by the same fountain, hands in his pockets, eyes tired but gentle. He looked older, not in years but in spirit. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us said everything words couldn't. Then finally, he broke it. You deserve the truth. I swallowed hard. Then tell me, why did you leave me like that? He exhaled deeply, as if releasing a secret he'd been carrying too long. Because I was still healing from a life I hadn't finished living. I frowned. Healing from what, Brad? He looked down at his hands. From myself. From the years I spent pretending to be okay. From the pain I caused others, and the guilt I never dealt with. His voice cracked slightly. When I met you, you made me feel human again, and that scared me. You saw me before I was ready to be seen. My chest tightened. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was sadness. He continued, voice trembling with honesty. The truth is, I wasn't ready for peace. I didn't know how to accept love that didn't need to be fixed. And I couldn't drag you into my storm while pretending it was sunshine. I looked at him, this man the world saw as perfect, and saw what fame had hidden. A man tired of performing happiness, tired of carrying guilt, tired of wearing a face that didn't match his heart. You think leaving me protected me? I whispered. He nodded slowly. I thought walking away was mercy. I thought you'd hate me less if I disappeared quietly. I took a step closer, voice breaking. You didn't protect me, Brad. You shattered me. And the worst part? I would have stayed. I would have helped you heal. Tears welled in his eyes. And for the first time since the wedding, he let them fall. I know, and that's exactly why I had to go. Because you would have loved me so deeply that I'd never learn to stand on my own again. His words pierced through me. They hurt because they were true. We stood there, both crying softly, two souls who loved each other at the wrong time. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. I wanted to give you this earlier, but I didn't know if you'd ever want to see me again. Inside was a gold locket, Simple, old-fashioned. Inside, it was a tiny photograph of the two of us laughing at that same garden months ago. On the back, engraved words read, "For the peace you gave me when I couldn't find my own." My hands trembled. "Why now?" He looked at the horizon, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I finally learned what peace feels like. And it started with you." The garden lights flickered on as night fell. For a moment, everything around us was still, like the world was holding its breath. He took a step closer. "You'll always be a part of me. Not the painful part, the one that taught me what real love is." I wanted to say something, to tell him that even after everything, part of me would always love him too, but the words wouldn't come. So I just nodded, tears streaming silently. He brushed a tear from my cheek and smiled sadly. "You'll be okay. You were always stronger than both of us." And then, without another word, he turned and walked away. No goodbye, no promises, just a quiet ending that somehow felt like the beginning of healing. As his figure faded into the distance, I clutched the locket against my chest. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like understanding. Sometimes love doesn't end because it dies. Sometimes it ends because one person finally learns to love themselves, and the other learns to let go. That night I went home, placed the locket beside the wooden box he'd once sent me, and whispered into the darkness. Maybe love isn't meant to be forever. Maybe it's meant to change us and then set us free. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly, in moments you don't expect. After that night in the garden, something inside me shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped screaming. It became a softer ache, one that taught me more than any love ever could. The days that followed were slow, almost tender. I began to move differently, slower, calmer, more deliberate. For the first time in months, I stopped checking the news, stopped searching for his name in headlines. I stopped waiting for a text that would never come. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and made coffee for one. The smell of roasted beans, the soft hum of the machine. It felt ordinary, but that was the beauty of it. Ordinary had become healing. I started writing again, small notes, journal entries, things I was too afraid to say out loud. In those pages, I found a new kind of honesty. Not the kind that seeks forgiveness, but the kind that seeks freedom. I wrote, "Maybe love doesn't fail when it ends. Maybe it succeeds when it teaches you who you are." It became my quiet mantra. Sometimes, healing looks like waking up without checking your phone. Sometimes it looks like smiling at strangers. Sometimes it's just remembering to breathe deeply, freely, without pain sitting on your chest. People still whispered, of course. The world doesn't forget easily. Every new rumor, every false headline would reach me like an echo. But I stopped explaining. I stopped defending. Because deep down, I realized truth doesn't need an audience. There were still hard days. Days when I'd see a movie poster with his face on it, and my throat would tighten. Days when I'd walk past a restaurant we'd once gone to, and the smell of rosemary and wine would drag me back to what once was. But grief is strange. It doesn't vanish. It just transforms, from heartbreak into gratitude. One evening, I visited the ocean again, the same one where I had thrown the key months ago. The waves were gentler this time, the sky painted in shades of gold and blue. I sat there barefoot, the sand cool beneath my feet, watching the tide move in slow rhythm. And for the first time, I smiled, because I realized something. He hadn't really taken anything from me. If anything, he'd left me with more than I had before. Clarity, strength, and a deeper understanding of what love truly means. Love isn't always staying. Sometimes it's leaving before you destroy what's pure. Sometimes it's setting someone free, even if that someone is yourself. I remember whispering into the wind, "Thank you, Brad, for teaching me that love can be kind even when it hurts." The next morning, I found an envelope in my mailbox. No return name, just a familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph of him sitting by the same ocean. On the back, it said, "Different shores, same sea, B." I smiled through tears. It wasn't a reconciliation. It was peace, a wordless understanding that we'd both found the calm we were searching for, separately, but parallel. In that moment, I stopped being the woman he left. I became the woman who learned to stay with herself. The world never knew that part of the story. They only knew the price tag, $90 million divorce. But the real story was priceless, a lesson in surrender, in loving someone enough to let the story end gracefully. Months later, during an interview, a journalist asked me gently, "If you could say one thing to him now, what would it be?" I smiled softly and replied, "Thank you for walking away before we broke each other. Thank you for giving me the silence I needed to find myself." The clip went viral, but for me, it wasn't for attention. It was closure. Because true healing isn't about forgetting. It's about remembering and without pain. Sometimes love's greatest act isn't staying forever. It's showing up for a moment that changes you, and then letting that moment live in peace. There comes a time when silence feels lighter than words, when you no longer need to explain your scars, because they've already turned into stories. For me, that time came one evening, 6 months after everything. The sun was setting over the Hollywood Hills, and I was sitting on the patio, barefoot, wrapped in a soft gray sweater. The city lights began to flicker below, thousands of tiny dreams glowing in the dusk. I could hear music from a nearby house, the sound of laughter, life moving on. And for the first time, I didn't feel left behind. The papers had long been signed. The world had moved on to newer headlines. But deep inside, I knew the real ending wasn't in the courtroom, or the gossip columns. It was right here, in this moment of stillness. I had survived the noise. I had rebuilt my peace, and I was ready to live again. A few close friends started coming around again, old faces who had quietly stepped back when everything was too chaotic. One of them, an old director friend, looked at me one night and said, "You know, I've never seen you this calm. You look like you finally came home to yourself." I smiled because that was exactly it. I had come home, not to a place, not to a person, but to me. I started taking long walks in the morning. No security, no rush, just me and the sound of my own thoughts. I'd buy a coffee from a small corner cafe where no one cared about fame, and they'd just call me Jay. It was humbling and beautiful. Healing had made me softer, not weaker. More grounded, not bitter. And in that softness, I found strength. One night, I came across an old photo, me and Brad at a charity gala, smiling, hands intertwined. For a moment, my chest tightened. Then I laughed softly, not out of sadness, but gratitude, because I could finally look back and not feel broken. Every chapter serves a purpose. Some teach us how to love. Others teach us when to let go. But all of them, every joy, every heartbreak, lead us closer to who we're meant to be. A few weeks later, I returned to work, not for the fame or the cameras, but because I wanted to create again. I wanted to tell stories that reminded people that behind every perfect image, there's a human heart learning to heal. On set, something strange happened. I didn't feel the old pressure, the need to prove anything. I just felt free. Every line, every emotion came from a truer place. And maybe that's what life does after pain. It gives you a second chance. Not to redo the past, but to do better with what's left. I began writing scripts with themes of rebirth, second chances, and quiet courage. One of them even caught his attention. A short handwritten note arrived one day. "It's beautiful work. You found your voice again." B. No bitterness. No apology. Just mutual respect. Two souls who once shared a life, now wishing each other well from afar. I kept that note folded inside my journal, not as a reminder of what ended, but of what began after. You see, healing isn't a single event. It's a series of small choices, choosing peace over anger, gratitude over resentment, truth over image. And so I began to live differently. No more headlines, no more chasing perfection, just quiet mornings, real laughter, meaningful art, and people who showed up without conditions. I realized that life doesn't have to be loud to be beautiful. Sometimes it's the quiet victories, the ones no one sees, that matter most. Brad once said in an old interview, "Love isn't always about forever. Sometimes it's about how deeply you cared when it was real." And now I finally understood what he meant. Our love wasn't a failure. It was a beautiful storm, short, wild, unforgettable. And though it ended fast, It left behind the calm that changed everything. So when people ask me about the $90 million divorce, I don't talk about the money, or the drama, or the headlines. I tell them, it was never about what I lost. It was about what I found after. Because sometimes, losing everything you thought you needed is the only way to find who you really are. And I did. Piece by piece, truth by truth, I found myself again. It was a quiet Sunday morning, one of those rare Los Angeles days when the air felt soft and forgiving, as if the city itself had decided to pause. I was walking through the art district, sunglasses on, a warm cup of coffee in hand. The gallery walls shimmered with early sunlight. It was my favorite kind of day. No schedule, no noise, just stillness. And then I saw him, Brad, standing by a painting, hands in his pockets. Same quiet expression, the one that always carried too many thoughts and not enough words. For a moment, time folded. Years of love, heartbreak, and silence collapsed into that single heartbeat. He turned, our eyes met. No scripts, no cameras, no audience, just two people who had once shared everything, now standing a few feet apart, calm and older. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Hey," I answered with a small smile. There was no anger, no awkwardness, just a quiet understanding. The kind that comes when pain has already been processed, when forgiveness has already been given in silence long before the meeting. We walked through the gallery side by side, talking about the art, about work, about life, not about us, not anymore, because the story of us had already found its ending. He looked healthier, happier maybe. I could tell he had found some version of peace too. At one point he said, "You look lighter, like the world finally let you breathe again." I laughed softly. Maybe it did. We both smiled. And in that smile, I saw what closure really means. It's not a grand apology, not a perfect conversation. It's just peace. The kind that doesn't need to fix anything, because it already made peace with the broken parts. Before leaving, he glanced back at the painting, a woman standing alone at the edge of the ocean. "That used to scare me," he said quietly. "Being alone. And now?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Now it looks peaceful." That was the moment I realized we weren't the same people anymore. We had both grown into different shapes, softer, wiser, and more human. I didn't feel sadness. I felt gratitude. Because not every story needs a reunion to be complete. Some love stories end quietly, with two people walking in different directions, carrying the same lesson in their hearts. As he left, he turned and said, "Take care of yourself, Jay." I nodded. "You too." And just like that, he was gone. I walked out of the gallery into the soft morning light. The city felt gentler. The sky seemed wider. And inside me, there was a stillness I hadn't known in years. That's the thing about healing. One day you just wake up, and the story that once shattered you doesn't hurt anymore. You remember it fondly, not painfully. You smile, not ache. I paused on the street corner, watching people rush by, strangers with their own heartbreaks, their own beginnings, their own unfinished stories, and I whispered to myself, it's okay. Everything turned out just the way it was meant to. Because it did. The fame, the chaos, the whirlwind marriage, all of it had been a lesson wrapped in love. Love had broken me, yes, but it had also rebuilt me into someone gentler, stronger, and freer. I walked home that morning under the soft golden light, coffee still warm in my hand, the city breathing around me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a character in a story that went wrong. I felt like a woman who lived through something beautiful, learned from it, and came out the other side, alive, calm and grateful. Sometimes endings aren't meant to break you. They're meant to set you free. And mine did. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you've watched until this moment, you didn't just hear a story, you felt it. Because somewhere between the heartbreak and the healing, maybe you saw a reflection of your own life. A reminder that love isn't always about forever. Sometimes it's about what it teaches you before it ends. Brad and I, we were two people who tried, who believed, who loved, who fell apart, and who still learned to wish each other peace. And that's enough. Life has a quiet way of showing us what really matters. not the noise. Not the perfection, but the moments when we choose kindness. Even after being hurt, the moments when we rise softly instead of breaking loudly. If you're watching this and you're going through your own heartbreak, I hope you remember this. Healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in waves, small, steady, sometimes invisible. But one day you'll wake up and realize that the pain that once owned you now feels like a distant memory. You'll breathe differently. You'll smile without pretending. You'll find peace in the same places that once made you cry. And when that happens, when your heart feels light again, you'll know you made it through. Because you did. You survived. You learned. You became. So from my heart to yours, thank you. Thank you for watching. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to TalksBerry and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps us continue telling emotional journeys like this one. And remember, sometimes the ending isn't a goodbye. It's the start of becoming who you were always meant to be. This story is dramatized for inspiration purposes only.